Thank you for listening to the Matt's Movie Reviews podcast, available on iTunes, Spotify, Podbean, and Stitcher. Also, please follow Matt's Movie Reviews on Facebook, YouTube, Parler, and Instagram. And of course, be sure to visit www.mattsmoviereviews.net for the latest reviews, top 10 lists, and more. Now, on to the show.
The best day of school is the last day of school.
You guys joining the other kids for the big tailgater?
Yeah, I'm not really in the mood for date rape tonight.
Okay, well, have a great summer.
Too dark. Well, does your family still go to Sun River every summer? We probably won't make it.
So you're just gonna hang out with your pops then?
Shut up, Shelly. I'm the girl whose dad died. Remember? Joey, stop that. Dad would have thought that was funny. I'm at a loss.
Don't worry, we'll take good care of her.
So, Joey, you have a boyfriend?
Good afternoon, Roy.
Hello, Joseph. Hello, Margaret.
Hi.
Is that your granddaughter?
Stuck with us all summer.
Victor's back with us again. Who knows how long this time?
Why don't you jump on my bike and tear through the neighborhood?
I'm sorry I scared you.
Okay, I know what I saw.
I was just doing one of my performance pieces.
For who?
For myself.
I met a boy.
Hello and welcome to the Matt's Movie Reviews podcast. I am your host, Matthew Pejkovic, and this is episode number 307. Out now on demand is My Summer as a Goth, a coming-of-age movie that stars Natalie Shershow as Joey, a grieving 16-year-old who during the summer holidays falls in love with Victor, played by Jack Levis, and his goth lifestyle. Featuring great performances and a winning screenplay, My Summer as a Goth convincingly portrays the highs and lows of first love and the rocky path taken to find a true identity. And joining me now on the Matt's Movie Reviews podcast is the director of My Summer as a Goth, Tara Johnson-Medinger. Tara, I thank you very much for your time today.
Thank you. Thank you for having me on your show.
So I've been doing a lot of research, listening to a lot of your interviews, and I heard that the origins of this film is a screenplay that you wrote with a good friend of yours, Brandon Lee Roberts. And the inspiration for this was those 1980s specifically kind of teen movies at the time. I imagine it'd be like a lot of the kind of John Hughes films and the like. What was it about those kind of movies that really resonated to you both that made you want to create your own version of this type of teen movie?
So Brandon and I we went to high school together. Mm-hmm. So we've known each other for a long time. And we came of age in the late 1980s in Salem, Oregon. And we were influenced hugely by those teenage films of the time. You know, your Pretty in Pinks, your Breakfast Club, Some Kind of Wonderful. Lots of those John Hughes films were super important to us as youth. And Brandon presented me with the original script of My Summer as a Goth in 2009. And we wanted to, I was completely drawn to it. And over the years, we worked together. I became a co-writer on the script. We developed it, refined some things, changed some things, you know, lots of development before we even got to production. But we wanted to present a really smart coming of age comedy that was more reflective of today's youth, right? Yeah. A lot of things have happened. You look at those kind of John Hughes 1980s films, sometimes 1990s films through today's lens, and you think, whoa, there's lots of problems here, you know, in terms of like, you know, just how people are presented and otherness, like making fun of otherness, that is very prevalent in a lot of those films. And we wanted to take that genre and kind of flip it, right? And freshen it up for today's youth to be more current with a lot of the issues that we talk about in this film, you know, forward facing about grief and otherness, gender identity and gender fluidity. Those are things that were super important to us in terms of, you know, just presenting it in a very normal way, right? You know, a lot of films tend to be like, have these gotcha moments on, you know, if someone comes out or there's a gay character or someone who looks different. And we really wanted to just be more subtle with that. And so that was a big part of kind of refining the script in those moments throughout the film.
I'm just curious, though, in the inspiration of the films that you took from the 80s and updating it to today's, conventions and norms and such, what was your in? I mean, what was it? How could you tap into what's going on with kids these days? Are you and Brandon dressing up as teenagers and posing like 21 Jump Street or something like that? Or do you have, what is it? How do you tap into that kind of thing to make sure you can get the authenticity that really is reflected in your movie?
Thank you. We did a lot of research, honestly. I mean, we, over the years, both of us have just like consumed teenage movies and, had a really good understanding of that genre. But also when we were getting to the final stages of feeling like the script was ready, I have I'm pretty connected here in Portland with the film community. One of my friends runs an acting studio that's specifically for teens and kids. And I said to her, like, hey, could we bring this in, bring our script in? Can we do a cold table read with your teen actors and get their impression of this film?
Yeah.
It was important for us to just like really, immerse ourselves in that demographic and say, is this working? Like, does this, like, are you digging it? Is it the story for you, or are we completely off base? Like, that was an important, like, tool to use in terms of gaining feedback from what we consider our core audience. And through that experience, we just, we gained a lot of knowledge, and, they had no idea what we were bringing in for them to read. We didn't prep them at all. It was very much like the story unfolded as we were reading it. One thing that we did the next week is we came back and we did what we thought was like a mock audition with all of the kids. And during that audition, we actually found Natalie, who plays our lead role of Joey. And that was like a complete surprise. Like, we were not even prepared and thinking about when we would go into production. But like, when Natalie auditioned, it was like Joey appeared in the room with us. It was like quite a magical experience. And so something that, she really like identified with the character of Joey through that table read that we did. She really prepped her audition. She wanted that role. And it was something that got us closer to, rolling camera. But we worked with Natalie for almost a good 6 months before we actually went into production.
It's really curious to me that, so you were inspired by these films in the 80s, and these days, 80s, everything is just really just kind of like reflecting a lot of pop culture and a lot of new content, new series and such. Was there any type of, I wouldn't say pressure, but any type of curiosity of maybe going down that path or setting it as kind of like a period film? Because the whole kind of goth thing, that was very much prevalent in the 80s as well, just as much as it is now, perhaps even more so back then. Was there any type of thought of, hey, maybe we could make this a period piece? Or was it important to make sure that the things that are happening today with teenagers is reflected in the material above anything else?
So we were always committed to making it like modern day, present day. We've been asked over the years, certainly this question of like, wouldn't it have been a better story to place in the 80s? And, I think maybe there was a moment there where like, well, should we consider that? But it just, we just really wanted to stay present day with it. Not only for the story that we wanted to tell, but as an independent production, doing anything that is set in a different time frame can be challenging. I mean, there's challenges already, right? But then you think about the other layer of authenticity of like, if you're set in the 80s and you do an exterior shot, you need to make sure like the cars in the background match that time frame, and that's going to cost you money. So it's, there are challenges to setting things in the past. And for us, that was a financial consideration that we were not willing to, dive into, but we are also very committed to make it a present day story.
And I'm glad that you did as well, because if I watch another 80s set in modern day kind of thing, I think I might scream because there's so many of them.
Right.
Why the goth scene? Was that a scene that yourself and Brandon were a part of when you were teenagers growing up? Is that something that you closely identify with?
Absolutely. I think that, we both had our times of, goth makeup and all of that stuff, but we always were part of the alternative crowd that hung out in downtown Salem and walked the mall and went to dance clubs. And, that was definitely our scene. There's a line in the movie that the character Antonio has that he says, "We freaks got to stick together."
Mm-hmm.
It's like all the oddballs, weirdos, misfits, like we all found each other down there. Whether, we are all dressed as goth or punk or, weird hippies, like it was a mix. And because there was a level of acceptance there that didn't necessarily exist in like our normal high school lives. Right.
Yeah.
So definitely Brandon and I gravitated to that, lifestyle, subculture, and, today certainly appreciate the beauty of the goth subculture and, have my own little kind of elder goth at heart moments that, are very much a part of my life still.
I'm curious about the relationship between grief and death and the goth scene itself. So if you could look at, say, the wicked brother of the goth scene, which I imagine would be like the black metal scene. I know when they applied like the makeup and stuff, they call it corpse paint because it kind of reflects like their kind of relationship, how they look at death in a much more macabre kind of way than I imagine the goth scene would. And in your movie, it begins in a cemetery and it ends in a cemetery. The character itself is in different places, but the setting's the same. When it comes to that relationship between the goth ideology and grief and death, where does that kind of all intertwingle, and especially in regards to the character of Joey in your movie?
Well, when we first meet Joey, she's in a really challenging place in her life. Like she's very sad. She's just lost her dad. She's grieving and rebelling at the same time. She's trying to find a way to relate to people in a different way because she's just gone through a tremendous amount of loss and transition in her life. And, she's already, like you said, we open in the cemetery. She's visiting her dad's grave. And so she's already very comfortable in that setting. It's not scary to her. She finds a lot of comfort and relief and going and talking to her father. And I think that that level, she's already sort of like a graveyard girl in a way. And so when she is transitioned into a goth, I think it not only helps her kind of bring a little bit of relief of not being seen as the girl whose dad just died. And, she can slough off that identity that like all her high school friends are seeing her as and walking around on eggshells with her. Cause she really puts that aside when she is meeting Victor and his friends and immersing herself in his life. And it's a way to kind of transform, not only physically transform, but also emotionally bring some of that relief. And I think that what we wanted to do in terms of the goth subculture is like really show that appreciation of the darker things in life and the beauty in the darkness. And I think Joey's already there. It's not a shock to her necessarily. I mean, it's not necessarily, she's uncomfortable in that place, right? But she's in this midst of a major transition throughout the summer. She's not going to do it perfectly. She's kind of trying to find her own way of doing her goth persona. And, she's getting bombarded by all these different people that, are living in this subculture already. And, she's still trying to manage her grief. But I think that there's that appreciation already of like seeing that darker side of life and embracing it versus running away from it. And I think that Joey kind of settles into that very nicely.
A character who was definitely settled into as a character of Victor. I've heard you describe him before as a narcissistic character, excuse me. And I'm just curious in regards to his personality. Do you think his personality is reflective of the lifestyle that he's in, or do you think that he uses the lifestyle that he's into as a cover for him to project that kind of egocentric kind of personality?
I think it's a combination. There are narcissists in every part of our culture that may identify in, whatever it may be. But I think that there is a lot to the character of Victor that for this film we weren't able to explore. But Jack and I talked a lot about his backstory and what took him to this place. And I think that Victor's a very troubled person. Like he's wounded in a lot of ways, and putting on, I would say that, he definitely digs the goth lifestyle and the way he looks and all of that, but he also uses it as a facade, as a protection device to kind of like present himself in this very grand way that can kind of help him not have to deal with what's really going on in his life. Right. Yeah. So there's, I think that, because this is Joey's story and, there are moments that we couldn't explore with him, with his character. And, but Jack and I also talked about, because Victor is so narcissistic and so intense, like it was hard for Jack to just play that character that way. Like he was like, and there has to be some humanity in this guy. And, and so we talked about ways that we could bring that in, very subtle ways. And I think that you see moments where Victor drops his guard in a way and, feels a little bit of sadness of maybe how he's treating Joey, but then it's like right back up. Right. And so again, if there's ever an opportunity to, enter this world again and make new stories revolving around these characters, that's a character I'm certainly interested in diving into in regards to their backstory.
And I think what's really cool with what you guys did with Victor is that you allowed the silliness of his seriousness to come through sometimes. There's that one scene where Joey and her friend are spying on him and her friend says, "Oh my God, he's smoking." And then you switch the shot over him and he's smoking this huge pipe. And it suits him. It's down exactly to who he is as a person, but just the look of it is just, you got to burst out laughing at the whole thing. I'm pretty sure that Jack really appreciated being able to put that type of dimension in it as well.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. There's some grandness, to this kind of performance that he's putting on for Joey in a lot of ways. That shot in particular that you're talking about is right outside of Joey's window, right? Yeah. He's very aware that she's there and looking at him. So
and he knows that she's looking at him as well. That's why he's there in the first place, right? Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
I think something that you guys really did nail in this film, above all the other things as well, is the music. And when I was a teenager, I also flirted with that kind of like the goth scene as well. But I was coming from more like a heavy metal side of it, and my in was the music. So at that time it was like 95, 96, and bands like Type O Negative and Danzig and Marilyn Manson, they had that kind of dark edge to them and look as well. And I think what you guys did here with the music was really, really cool as well. Your music supervisor was Jana Cushman. How did you two really want to approach the music in this? Because there's different ways you can go. You can go to really heavy industrial way. You can go the way of like something like The Cure, or more kind of romantic kind of way to it. How did you really want to kind of approach it and find the right tone that suited the tone of the characters in the screenplay?
So Jana and I met actually through the production of this film. So their band Darkswoon appeared in the movie, in the club scene. So that's Darkswoon performing, and we were introduced through a mutual friend. I needed a goth band to play in the club scene. A friend of mine who's a manager introduced me to Jana, and then they're in the movie. And throughout the course of meeting them, they came forward and said, hey, I really want to be more involved in this project. I'm really interested in score, doing original composition, and I loved their music already. Darkswoon's music, we asked to, have a few of their songs in the film. Jana has also worked at a club and knows a lot and, performs frequently. So knows a lot of the current goth and dark wave bands that are around town. And so they were really integral in terms of cultivating relationships with various bands that ultimately we placed in the film. There were a couple other bands that I had prior relationships to that, we also used their music. Of course, we had our original inspiration soundtrack that was based primarily on songs from 80s goth bands. But kind of going back to what we were saying about this kind of new, setting a present day coming of age film, we also wanted to do that with the music. Again, financially, clearing music is hugely expensive, right? And especially if you're using stuff that is on labels and, from the 80s and things like that. But I also wanted to bring forward a new vibe and really celebrate all of these artists that are currently working today. And so Jana had a lot of these relationships, and I'd be for this scene, I really, want a Cocteau Twins vibe. And, this is kind of the tone and the emotion that we want. And they would go out and kind of go through tons of albums and send me selections. And then ultimately they also did the original score for the film. And that was really cool. It was the first time that they had ever, done something like this, of this kind of bigger scale. And, now they're in school at the Berklee School of Music studying film score. So it's really cool to be a part of Jana's early career in this. And we just worked really well together. We just understood each other in terms of what kind of mood and emotion and tone that I wanted for certain scenes. And they just dove headfirst into making it happen. And so they also won an award at the Downtown LA Film Festival last year for Best Score. We were able to put out a soundtrack through bandcamp.com. We weren't able to include everything that is in the movie, but we included a lot of things. And there's certain songs, we did a cover that Jana did sing of Just Like Heaven from The Cure. Yep. And we were able to clear that for the movie. So that's in there in the movie. That's the only place you're going to be able to hear it. So, but that was a lot of fun, and, had its challenges as well. And, but it was really cool to take that particular piece because it's so beloved, and also a real genre, a lot of people, everybody knows that song, right? It's whether you were in the goth scene or not, it's it comes on the radio. We had it playing during rehearsals, and all the kids were singing along. So it's still very much a part of pop culture today. And so I was really glad that we were able to do a cover of that song and for Jana to put their spin on it.
So I talked to a lot of indie filmmakers over the year, and I know that creating an indie film can be a long process, it can take years sometimes, depending situations, financial, distribution-wise, etc. What's really interesting about what happened with this movie is that there seems to be, as the film was being made, a correlation or a synchronization with what was happening in the real world, and specifically with the Me Too movement. And I think there are strong parallels to be found between what's happening with Joey's character in this movie and some of the things that are happening in real life, especially the relationship she has with Victor as well. Excuse me. For example, I've been watching the Nexium documentary on The Vow. I don't know if you've seen that
I haven't.
on HBO. And a big thing about that movie is that that also kind of just came like as that was breaking, that was really sinking in with the Me Too movement stuff as well. And a big thing in that movie is almost kind of like a servitude between the female and male members of that cult. And it seems like in a certain way that Victor was almost kind of like presenting himself as like certain master over Joey, always telling her to reapply her makeup, all this stuff. Right. So while you have these themes going on and that type of character dynamic going on and these real life things happening as well, did it just feel like that this was just like kind of meant to be, that this correlation was happening in the film to real life, that even though you were going through struggles, even though it was taking a long time to get stuff done, that this is exactly what we wanted to say and this is now the perfect time to say it?
Yeah, I mean, we always wanted to, again, kind of take that genre, that coming of age genre, and, you know, kind of turn it over in a way and freshen it up. But when everything kind of broke with Me Too, and we had just finished production and we were in our edit. And so that was the fall of 2017. And it had a tremendous amount of impact. Even for me, you know, as a woman director that, you know, I consider myself a very strong person in terms of like my expectations and what I wanted for this movie and the stories that I want to tell. But it also, like, there were some things in the film where I was like, this doesn't land all that well anymore, right? You know, you look at those films from the 80s and, you know, there's some problems with them, right? And so those are things that we certainly wanted to avoid, but it was also like those tropes that are so ingrained, so institutionalized in you as a storyteller that it's like once Me Too kind of popped open a lot of people's perceptions of things, it made me critically think about our movie, you know, and what we were putting on screen. And so there were certain things that we did adjust because of that, because certain moments that felt too much, right? And that we pulled back on, right? And, you know, I think that people like Victor exist in our culture. And this is an opportunity to recognize that. But, you know, and Joey is swept up and swooned by that and, you know, has some difficulty in a way separating herself from that because he is very engaging. And, you know, I think that matches a lot of teenage experience. You get swept up in the moment and she's, you know, it has fallen for him. And, but she has these people in her life that really have her back, right? Her grandparents, ultimately her mom, Molly the character of Molly, her best friend from high school, is like really steady, right? She doesn't like make fun of her for changing her appearance. She's always just really has taken care of Joey and protects her. And so, you know, Antonio, some of these new people that in her life are like giving her all the cautionary red flags of like, you know, this guy really is not so good for you, right? So she had some support as a character that sometimes you don't see on screen. And, you know, ultimately, you know, she had to come to that realization herself, but there was just a lot of people like, you know, stepping forward to say, wait a minute, this isn't cool. And, you know, and that I think strengthened Joey's transition. You know, she doesn't have this like huge epiphany moment at the end. She, you know, she kind of settles at a different place in her life. And, you know, it's really exciting to see that like she's on her own, right? And she's got this solid foundation of people that are still there to support her.
And, you know, when I was doing some research on yourself, Tara, I came across a video that you did about inspiring teachers. And you talked about a teacher taught you that as you were growing into an artist, that mistakes are beautiful. And I think that's a really good mantra to have in regards to what Joey went through with her own journey and that. And I'm sure that's something that you keep with you to this day, both as a filmmaker and as a person as well.
Absolutely. Yeah. The little thing piece you're referring to is between myself and Mike Holcomb, who was one of my art teachers in college, and he and I are still friends to this day. And I was so inspired by him. And, I went to college a long time ago, and I really did feel like he gave me the allowance to be messy, because I wasn't necessarily like a really refined, good, fine artist. And I found myself in a lot of these art classes with like incredible illustrators and painters and things. And I always felt really messy with like I wasn't quite getting it. And, but Mike really just like said, you got to find your own way. And I think that that's something that I've taken forward in my whole life. And, I've always been out there about like things that I don't know and need to gain knowledge on. And I'm not afraid to ask questions and seek support in areas that, are not my forte. And I think that part of that was that foundation in college of really just saying, go for it, make mistakes, and then learn from it. Right. And I think that Joey has that moment as well in her in her journey.
Well, My Summer as a Goth out now on demand for people to check out. You can go to Facebook and find the Facebook page. There's also a website, mysummeраsagoth.com, and that's got all the links to where you can watch the movie. And I really highly recommend people check this film out, because I really enjoyed it, and it kind of brought me back in little ways to some of the mistakes I made when I was a kid. And like we've said, mistakes are beautiful, and people should not make the mistake and miss this film. You should check it out right now, available on demand. And I thank you very much, Tara Johnson-Medinger, for your time today, and congratulations with the film once again.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it.